I was engaged, but I had no intention of getting married. My fiancée felt the same way. She'd even hired a ridiculously handsome assistant. I'd allowed all of it, encouraged it, even anything to give me a clean way out of this engagement. But your ambition, Victoria, was just too vast. The Lancaster dynasty isn't something you can just sink your teeth into, and our reputation isn't something a petty social climber like you get to tarnish. By the time Victoria Sterling lost everything, she was on her knees in a county jail visiting room, begging, "Ethan, please just let me go. I'll do anything you want. I swear I'm still clean. No, wait. I'll take care of Chloe when she has the baby. I'll be her servant. Just forgive me. I'll do anything." Her half-sister just smiled sweetly. Her arm looped possessively through mine. "Sorry, dear sister. Everything you had, I have now. Besides, Ethan's not interested in anyone else's leftovers." Pathetic. Victoria was so naive. A barren plot of land nobody wanted. But then, the second son of the Lancaster family has always had more discerning taste. That morning, I was just surfacing from the warm entanglement of a woman I'd met last night when my phone buzzed insistently on the nightstand. The screen flashed with a number from Sterling Industries' executive office. I frowned and answered, "Mr. Lancaster, I am so sorry to bother you." The voice on the other end was professionally sweet, laced with a carefully measured dose of anxiety. "The president's office just sent out a memo. Ms. Sterling is calling an all-hands meeting for the executive team to discuss a critical partnership proposal. Attendance is mandatory, no exceptions. Will you be?" A dry chuckle escaped my lips, clearing the last of the whiskey fog from my brain. A smirk I couldn't suppress pulled at my mouth. In the 6 months since I'd been given a token VP title at Sterling Industries, I hadn't set foot in the office once. I couldn't even tell you which way the front door faced. My days were a blur of exclusive clubs, private yachts, and ignoring the very existence of my fiancée. This sudden, mandatory meeting had the fingerprints of Victoria's new boy toy assistant all over it. And Victoria had to know. She hated me as much as I had no desire to marry her. "Got it," I said, my voice lazy, and hung up. I closed my eyes, feigning a return to sleep. At 2 o'clock that afternoon, I strolled into the Sterling Industries conference room right on the dot. The long table was already full. Victoria sat at the head, a vision in a tailored black suit, her legs sheathed in nude stockings that disappeared into a pair of sharp stilettos. She was, I had to admit, beautiful. Her brow furrowed for a fraction of a second as I entered. A micro-expression I would have missed if I hadn't been watching her so closely. The young man beside her shot to his feet, a practiced plastic smile on his face. "I'm Caleb Vance, Ms. Sterling's executive assistant." "Mr. Lancaster, you finally made it." We were beginning to wonder. I ignored his snide welcome and walked directly to my designated seat. Honestly, acknowledging him would have been the highlight of his ancestors' lineage. My dismissal clearly stung. A flash of irritation crossed Caleb's face, but he swallowed it down, cleared his throat, and launched into his presentation. "Today's agenda is focused on deepening our strategic partnership with Lancaster Global," he began. "After internal review, we believe the current terms can be optimized. We are proposing a new long-term cooperation agreement." He paused, glancing at me for a reaction. Seeing none, he continued. "Of course, since this partnership is mutually beneficial, we propose that Lancaster Global concede an additional 3% profit margin. This would significantly enhance Sterling's profitability." He didn't get to finish. I flicked the pen I was holding across the table. It clattered against the opposite wall, and my voice cut through his pitch like glass. "Absurd." I leaned back in my chair. "Caleb, is this your first day? Or did no one tell you Lancaster Global is a partner, not a charity case?" My words hit their mark. A dark flush crept up Caleb's neck. Even Victoria's composed mask cracked, her expression hardening. I suppose the Golden Girl of Boston, used to a life of seamless success, wasn't accustomed to being told no so bluntly. "What's that supposed to mean?" he sputtered. "This proposal was reviewed and approved by the entire executive office under Ms. Sterling's direct guidance." A half smile played on my lips as I let my gaze drift to Victoria, then sweep across the other executives. "Oh, really?" Under my stare, Victoria shifted uncomfortably, pretending to be absorbed in the documents in front of her. The rest of the executives suddenly found their own papers intensely fascinating, their heads bowed like a flock of quail. "Caleb," I said, my voice dangerously soft, "I feel I must remind you that a partnership is between two corporations. Sterling Industries doesn't get to make decisions for Lancaster Global. Your family doesn't have that authority. She doesn't have that authority, and a two-bit assistant who can't even see the stage, let alone get on it, most certainly does not. That did it. The insult was a direct hit to Caleb's inflated ego. For months, riding on Victoria's coattails, he'd been the king of this little castle. The constant flattery had him believing he was a titan of industry, making him forget he was just a glorified gopher who'd probably groveled for this job. Seeing a useless trust fund brat like me dare to disrespect him sent Caleb over the edge. He glanced at Victoria, who simply pursed her lips in a cold smirk, and that was all the encouragement he needed. He snatched his hot coffee from the table and lunged, ready to throw it at me. What is a degenerate waste of space like you know about business? But the bodyguard and assistant I keep on my payroll aren't for show. They're expensive and they're loyal. There was no way that coffee was touching me. My assistant moved like lightning, intercepting Caleb's arm. The scalding liquid splashed across the polished mahogany table, a few drops spattering onto the documents. The dark stains were an eyesore, just like my engagement to Victoria. You're fired, Caleb shrieked, wrenching his arm free. I'm Victoria's boyfriend. I can make that call. I rolled my eyes, calmly picked up my own untouched coffee, and took a sip. My gaze settled on Victoria. Her brow was deeply creased, a clear sign of her displeasure with me, but she remained silent. Pathetic, I thought. Did she really think she could sick her little lapdog on the Lancaster family and expect us to heal? The conference room was dead silent. Every person in the room held their breath, probably regretting they'd ever shown up to work today. This was a storm they wanted no part of. I pulled out my phone and, in front of everyone, put on speaker. It rang once before it was picked up. The voice of Victoria's father, Marcus Sterling, came through, dripping with manufactured warmth. Ethan, my boy, what a surprise. To what do I owe the pleasure? You should come over for dinner tonight. I let out a low chuckle, my tone unreadable. Mr. Sterling, sorry to interrupt your day. I paused for effect. That new assistant of Victoria's, the one who claims to be your future son-in-law, just fired me. I have to say, if Victoria wasn't happy with our arrangement, you could have just told me. I let the silence stretch, listening to the frantic, panicked breaths on the other end of the line. Then, I delivered the final blow. Let's call off the engagement. I have no interest in marrying a woman who can't make up her mind. A woman like that has no place as a Lancaster. It seems our families aren't destined to work together after all. I'll let my father know as soon as I get home. A few seconds of dead air, then Marcus's voice returned, slick with appeasement. Ethan, don't be rash. I'm sure this is just some silly misunderstanding with Victoria. I promise you, nothing is going on between them. Don't talk to your father yet. The Sterling family will give you a satisfactory explanation for this. I laughed softly, ended the call, and stood up to leave. This whole meeting was a farce. A boring one at that. If my father hadn't been so determined to conquer the Boston market and to keep me from competing with my older brother for the company, he never would have chosen the Sterlings. He'd threatened to cut off my trust fund to get me to agree to this sham marriage. If it weren't for the promise of a life of unfettered freedom down the line, I wouldn't have given Victoria Sterling the time of day, let alone exiled myself to this city. I might play the part of the aimless playboy, but I still carry the Lancaster name. Since our engagement, my family had poured countless resources into Sterling Industries, propping Victoria up as Boston's premier CEO at Girl, all for the sake of appearances. And this woman had the audacity to think we were running a charity? That multi-million-dollar contracts just fell in her lap? The stupidity was breathtaking. Stop. I was almost at the door when Caleb, his face contorted with rage, came after me. Who the hell do you think you are? You think you can decide the fate of a partnership between our companies? You think calling her father changes anything? Dream on. You just wait. I'm having Victoria draft your termination letter right now. I didn't break my stride. I tossed a final comment over my shoulder. A dog is a dog. All it knows how to do is bark. In your world, Sterling Industries is a giant. To us, it's a promising startup, at best. Back in the conference room, Victoria stared at the ugly coffee stains on the table, her fingers unconsciously tightening around her pen. A storm of emotions brewed in her eyes. She had always believed she was the one in control, never imagining that her meticulously planned power play would end in such utter humiliation. And the man she'd always looked down on had, in a place she couldn't even see, already fitted the reins on his Sterling Industries. The air in the conference room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Caleb Vance stood with his head down, face burning with humiliation. He tried to follow me out, only to be met with a crisp shoulder throw from my bodyguard that nearly shredded his designer suit. Ethan Lancaster, this isn't over, he muttered. The suit, I recalled, was a gift from Victoria last month. Far too expensive for his salary. I heard his pathetic threat and turned back, a mocking smile on my face. Even the clothes on your back are paid for by a woman. You're pathetic, Caleb. And Victoria, your taste is truly abysmal. Caleb's eyes went red. It had been a long time since anyone had dared to look down on him. You bastard. This is a custom suit. It cost $10,000. Can you even afford to replace it? I made a show of cleaning out my ear, signaling my bodyguard to stand down. I straightened my tie, my voice placid. A gift from Victoria? It's ugly. Next time, instead of a suit, she should just get you a leash. It would be more fitting. Smack. Victoria slammed her palm on the table, her eyes like ice. Ethan Lancaster, you've gone too far. She stood, throwing her pen down with a clatter. Apologize to Caleb. Now, or I will terminate our company's partnership, and you'll be the one to answer for it. Caleb, seeing his protector rise, puffed out his chest, a perfect embodiment of a dog borrowing its master's ferocity. I almost wanted to give him an award for it. You hear that? Apologize. And you're paying for my emotional damages, he crowed. A sly look entered his eyes as he raised his voice. And I want a sincere apology. On your knees. Without sincerity, don't blame the Sterlings for cutting ties with Lancaster Global. He actually laughed, as if he truly believed I was about to kneel before him. I sized him up, my contempt unconcealed. It seemed the Sterling family was long overdue for a lesson in humility if even their pets had forgotten how to behave. But maybe this was on my family for arranging my marriage to a woman from such a minor dynasty. They must have thought Lancaster Global was in decline. I gave a slight nod to my bodyguards. Two large figures stepped forward, and in one clean motion, they had Caleb on the floor, his forehead pressed against the cold, hard tile. Apologize? On my knees. I stood over him, my leather shoe tapping lightly against his cheek. You kneel here for the rest of the day, and I'll pretend this never happened. Otherwise, I'd advise you to start making your final arrangements. Caleb winced in pain, but remained defiant. You wouldn't dare? Victoria won't let you get away with this. He trailed off as he saw the cold fury solidifying in my eyes. Ignoring him, I bent down and used a shirt to wipe away an imaginary speck of dust from my shoe. The other executives in the room lowered their heads, pretending to be invisible, waiting to see how Victoria would clean up this mess. I let out a cold snort. I was done watching this woman's performance. My 6 months of patience had finally paid off. I had my excuse to end the engagement. Even if she hadn't pulled this stunt today, I would have found another way to blow things up. Just as I turned to leave, Victoria's voice, tight with suppressed rage, stopped me. Stay right there. Ethan Lancaster, is this how the Lancasters conduct themselves? Apologize to my assistant. The sharp click-clack of her heels echoed as she marched toward me, her face a thunderous mask as she delivered her final ultimatum. I loosened my tie, watching her with detached amusement. Is there something else, Ms. Sterling? I asked. If not, you should probably get back to your office and start preparing for bankruptcy. Her voice was sharp with sarcasm. Let me tell you something. This engagement was a one-sided wish from my family. I can back out anytime. Don't think you can throw your weight around just because you're a Lancaster. The decisions at Lancaster Global are not made by a trust fund brat who does nothing but party. Did you really think a waste of space like you could ever marry me? She took another step, her eyes locked on mine, voice dripping with warning. Apologize now while you still can. Don't blame me for being ruthless when you're begging for mercy later. Caleb, still pinned to the floor, found his voice again. That's right. Victoria's right. Apologize, or we'll run you out of Boston. My gaze lingered on Victoria's tense face for a moment before I let out a low laugh. Without answering her, without a glance at the man on the floor, I turned and walked toward the door. Victoria watched my retreating back, her fingernails digging so deep in her palms they could have drawn blood. Caleb was still shouting from the floor. The executives were still staring at their shoes, and the entire, humiliating farce had landed squarely on her shoulders. She had always thought she was the one holding all the cards. But this game was, and always had been, for the powerful. I had just stepped out of the Sterling Industries building when I heard rushed footsteps behind me. Caleb, it seemed, was a glutton for punishment. Instead of staying on the floor where he belonged, he'd chase me out for another round of humiliation. I shook my head, taking in his wrinkled suit and the dust smudged on his face from his time on the floor. Ethan Lancaster, don't you dare walk away. You're not leaving here until you apologize. I turned, a lazy, mocking smile on my face. The contempt in my eyes was impossible to miss. What's the matter? Didn't get enough kneeling in a conference room? Came out for an encore? My words hit a nerve. He flinched, but still managed to puff out his chest with false bravado. I'm Victoria's fiancé. You can't afford to offend me. I gestured to my bodyguards with my chin, my tone casual but with an unmistakable edge of command. Since our friend here doesn't appreciate the privacy of the conference room for his soul searching, let's find him a more public venue. The front steps of the building get a lot of foot traffic. It's a great spot for him to reflect on how to be a decent human being. My bodyguards immediately moved in, grabbing the struggling Caleb and dragging him toward the main entrance. Just then, Victoria emerged, lingering in the shadows of the doorway. Her eyes held a detached coldness, as if she were watching a mildly interesting street performance. In her mind, I was just bluffing. I glanced her way, my expression unreadable. I knew she had no real feelings for Caleb. The little clown was just a pawn she was using to test my limits. If I backed down, it would suit her perfectly. If I pushed back hard, she could discard him without a second thought. The one thing she hadn't calculated was that once I decided to act, I had no intention of giving her a chance to regret it. Right there, in front of her, I called my brother and put the phone on speaker, my voice deliberately drawling. "Daniel," I said, my voice deliberately lazy, "send a little gift over to Sterling Industries. Something to help them remember their manners." I had no doubt my assistant had been giving my brother a live feed of the entire fiasco. Daniel would know exactly what I meant, and he'd be more than happy to oblige. Having a ne'er-do-well younger brother who wasn't competing for the throne had to be a huge relief for him. Such a drama queen. Victoria sneered from the doorway, her voice low but perfectly audible. "You think the board of Lancaster Global listens to you? Don't try to scare us with a phone call." Caleb, now being forced onto the steps, heard her and found his courage again. "Yeah, let's see you do it. I bet you don't have the guts to make Lancaster Global pull their funding." I ignored them, standing there and waiting calmly. Less than 10 minutes later, a black Bentley screeched to a halt at the curb. Marcus Sterling practically fell out of the car, his usually composed, authoritative face etched with panic. He half ran, half stumbled over to me, bowing slightly with a fawning expression. "Mr. Lancaster, please don't be angry. What happened today? I will give you a satisfactory explanation. I promise." That deferential Mr. Lancaster made the faces of the watching Sterling executives freeze in disbelief. Caleb's shouting finally died in his throat, his face draining of all color as he gaped, speechless. The smirk on Victoria's face froze, then shattered. The blood drained from her face. She took an involuntary step forward, trying to explain, "Dad, don't listen to him. It was just a small conflict between Caleb and—" Crack! Her words were cut short by the sharp sound of his hand striking her face. "Shut up." Marcus Sterling's voice was a furious hiss. If they weren't in public, he'd probably have taken his belt to her. But now wasn't the time to deal with Victoria. He turned back to me, his voice laced with desperate caution. "Mr. Lancaster, this was a mistake. My people were out of line, and they angered you. Rest assured, I will handle this." Severely. The world around us went silent. I looked at the groveling Marcus Sterling and the pale, shocked Victoria. My thumb traced the edge of my phone. I didn't answer him. I just cast a lazy glance at Caleb, who was now trembling like a leaf on the steps, and then back at Victoria, who was struggling to maintain a shred of composure. A slow, meaningful smile spread across my face. This little drama wasn't ending with her father's arrival. It was just getting started. Marcus Sterling shot his daughter a look so cold it could freeze fire, and Victoria's budding panic turned into sheer terror. He ignored everyone else, bowing his head slightly to me. "Mr. Lancaster, what are your instructions?" I just shook my head, said nothing, and turned toward my car. A flicker of frustration crossed Marcus's face. In his eyes, I was probably just an unimportant pawn in the Lancaster Empire, but he had to play the part. I gave a subtle nod to my bodyguards. They hauled the boneless Caleb to his feet. As they passed Marcus, one of them delivered a cold message. "Mr. Sterling wants you back at the family estate. Immediately. There are things that need to be discussed." Victoria froze, her hand half extended, trembling in the air. Her father's earlier words on the phone echoed in her ears. "You're not the only heir to this family, Victoria. The only reason you're in that chair is because of your engagement to Ethan Lancaster." The gazes from her executives were a mixture of pity, scorn, and a desperate desire to be anywhere else. She felt her face burn, a hot wave of rage threatening to consume what was left of her composure. Meanwhile, Caleb had lost all his earlier swagger. He was dragged away like a sack of garbage, his legs shaking uncontrollably, his face a mask of pure terror. He finally understood. He wasn't Victoria's knight in shining armor. He was just a disposable pawn. Within 3 days, a delegation from Sterling Industries arrived at Lancaster Global to offer a formal apology. They were very, very sincere. Victoria was officially stripped of her heir apparent status, and the engagement, naturally, was terminated. The Sterlings even offered a hefty gift as a peace offering, begging Lancaster Global not to pull out of their joint ventures. They even began vetting the other children in the Sterling family, hoping to salvage the marital alliance with the Lancasters. Having lost everything, Victoria Sterling locked herself in her penthouse, staring out at the Sterling Industries tower that had once been the symbol of her power. Her eyes were filled with venom. Caleb Vance's fate was even worse. After being educated by the Sterling family security, he was thrown out of Boston. The rumor was he had 2 broken ribs and was saddled with a mountain of debt. Every penny Victoria had ever spent on him was being called in, with loan shark-level interest. At the office, allegiances shifted faster than the stock market. Subordinates who once fawned over her now avoided her like the plague. The looks from the corporate climbers were undisguised contempt. Every hushed conversation in the hallways felt like it was about her. Just as Victoria was desperately plotting how to reclaim her position, she received an unexpected visitor. In a quiet corner of a cafe, a man in his 40s sat across from her, an unreadable smile on his face. My uncle, Julian Lancaster, held an awkward position in the family. He was cut out of the inheritance, but refused to accept his fate. Ms. Sterling, a pleasure to see you again, he said, his tone light as he took a sip of his coffee. I heard about what happened. Such a shame. Victoria watched him warily, her mind racing. She couldn't fathom why a Lancaster would seek her out now. Mr. Lancaster, I doubt you're here just to offer condolences. Julian smiled, leaning forward slightly. Not at all. I'm here to discuss a partnership. Victoria's face twisted into a sneer. You flatter me, Mr. Lancaster. At the moment, I can't even get through the front door of my own company. Julian's smile was warm, but his eyes were pure calculation. Ms. Sterling, we're the same kind of people. Let's not waste time with pleasantries. You want the Sterling family back. I want the Lancaster family. Knowing his words weren't enough, Julian slid a file across the table. This is my plan. Take a look. Julian understood that even though Victoria was out, she still held secrets. She still had value. Combined with the allies he'd been cultivating within Lancaster Global for years, his plan was far from fantasy. Victoria's expression shifted as she read, her face a canvas of shadow and light. The plan was audacious. If it worked, she would get everything back. And right now, what did she have left to lose? After a long silence, she looked up. I'm in. What are your conditions? Her eyes burned with the desperate fever of a gambler who'd lost it all. Julian chuckled softly, slowly laying out his terms. Ms. Sterling, the Sterling family has other options for partners. But your only choice is me. Shouldn't you be showing a little sincerity? Victoria's expression faltered. She knew exactly what he meant. Besides herself, what assets did she have left? Finally, she came to a decision. She straightened her posture, arching her back to perfectly display the plunging neckline of her dress. Julian's eyes drank her in. Victoria was a stunning woman, cold and beautiful. It was a look that could stop any man in his tracks. Sunlight streamed through the blinds, striping Victoria's face. But beneath the bright light, her expression was dark as night. An air of charged negotiation, thick with unspoken promises, filled the space between them. Perhaps overwhelmed by the blatant nature of the transaction, a flush crept up Victoria's neck. But shame was a luxury she couldn't afford when the Sterling Empire was on the line. A triumphant smile played on Julian's lips. A wise choice. We're going to be excellent allies. That night, in the presidential suite of a 5-star hotel, Victoria stood wrapped in a towel by the floor-to-ceiling window, gazing down at the city lights. Her expression was a tangled mess of ambition and resignation. The bathroom door opened. Julian came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. She didn't struggle. She just closed her eyes and endured it. In the face of power, her body was her only currency, her only pledge of allegiance. Meanwhile, the official negotiations between the Lancaster and Sterling families had hit a wall. The fault lay squarely with the Sterlings, but the two companies were so deeply intertwined that a clean break was nearly impossible. Ethan, you need to pick a new fiancée from the Sterling family, my father said, his voice firm as he sat behind his massive desk. Every Lancaster has a duty. You may not be inheriting the company, but you will contribute to its growth. That is the price you pay for the life you lead. I stared at him, saying nothing. Whoever said the lives of the wealthy were carefree? You enjoy the rewards. You pay the price. I understand, father. You can make the arrangements. My only request is that my next fiancé doesn't have so many schemes. I left his office rubbing my temples, a deep weariness settling into my bones. Marrying Victoria had never been what I wanted, The engagement itself had been the absolute limit of my tolerance. I thought sabotaging the deal would get me off the hook. Instead, my father was just swapping out one sterling for another. The irony was suffocating. Before I could figure out my next move, a quiet storm began brewing at Sterling Industries. Victoria still had loyalists within the company, and with Julian pulling strings and leveraging Lancaster resources, she began to regain her footing. Caleb Vance, nursing a deep-seated grudge against the Sterlings and easily swayed by money, was brought back into the fold. He became Victoria's attack dog, ready to bite whomever she pointed at. Victoria, besides the board, the rest of the company is ours now, Caleb reported, kneeling at her feet to gently remove the heels she'd worn all day. The bruises on his face were still visible, but his voice was pure sycophancy. He knew he had no other options. If he didn't cling to Victoria, he'd likely end up as a missing person case. Victoria gazed out the window, her voice chillingly calm. The board? Win over who you can. The ones who refuse. Make them disappear. Don't worry, she added. Julian has people for that. Caleb's mind, already twisted by resentment, didn't hesitate. Understood. But a lot of them are your family members. Are you sure? Victoria's icy glare cut him off, and he knew instantly he'd asked a stupid question. As Caleb scrambled out of the room, a faint smile touched Victoria's lips. She knew exactly what she was doing. The old guard of the Sterling family had to go, even if they were her own flesh and blood. And when the dust settled, either Julian or Caleb would take the fall. She had to remain the flawless, beautiful CEO. Across from me, in the quiet cafe, sat a strikingly beautiful woman. Her expression was hard to read. As the new candidate for my fiancée, chosen by the Sterling family, she should have been deferential, even submissive. The Sterlings couldn't afford to offend the Lancasters. But this woman was different. There was a flicker of eagerness in her eyes, yes, but it was overshadowed by something else. Raw ambition. Mr. Lancaster, allow me to introduce myself. My name is Chloe Sterling. Her voice was smooth, confident. My official status isn't exactly pristine. I'm the illegitimate daughter, Victoria's half-sister. She said it, then fell silent, simply watching me, waiting for my reaction. She was right. I didn't care about her parentage. Since I was trapped in this marital alliance with the Sterlings anyway, who I married was irrelevant. I had no desire to fight for the Lancaster inheritance, and frankly, not the aptitude for it. Marrying a woman with a lower social standing would only put my older brother more at ease. The second son of a dynasty has his own survival tactics. Still, her frank introduction piqued my interest. Oh, I leaned back, affecting an air of arrogance. Don't you think you're aiming a little low, Ms. Sterling? The esteemed second son of the Lancaster family, reduced to marrying the illegitimate daughter of a minor house. My jab didn't faze her. She smiled, a small, radiant gesture that lit up her face. She really was stunning, with a cool elegance that would put most Hollywood actresses to shame. You just aimer. Lancaster. My status is humble, of course, but doesn't that suit your needs perfectly? I shifted in my seat, amplifying my playboy persona. I didn't speak, just watched her with a detached amusement. Chloe continued, undeterred. I've always admired the relationship you have with your brother. You've never fought over the family fortune, which shows a remarkable maturity on your part. And rest assured, while I may be an illegitimate daughter, my position in the family now is far more secure than Victoria's ever was. I'm doing this for my own security and status. I won't deny it. She leaned forward slightly. And I don't think a man like you would refuse a beautiful woman who meets every single one of your unspoken requirements. You have my word. Agree to this marriage, and you will be the uncrowned king of the Sterling family. I looked at this brilliant, perceptive woman, and I laughed. It was true. For a second son like me, unless I was a bona fide genius, the inheritance was out of reach. That's why my family insisted on a Sterling wife, a family not powerful enough to stir up trouble within the Lancaster dynasty. But what man doesn't love power? The title of uncrowned king would be bestowed by the Lancasters, but the perks would be provided by the Sterlings. Impressive. You're very smart, I said. But you know, a woman who is too smart isn't always a good thing. Chloe just smiled faintly. Don't worry. I know what I want. And on that subject, I believe I'm just smart enough. I nodded, a playful smile touching my lips. All right, I agree. But what about your show of sincerity? Chloe's smile widened. She gracefully smoothed her dress and linked her arm through mine. Let's go, my dear fiancé, she murmured, her voice dropping to a seductive whisper. To show my sincerity, I've made special preparations for today. She gave a subtle but unmistakable glance down at her own form-fitting dress. I've booked us a suite at the Four Seasons. I believe in sealing a deal properly. Well, on a hot day like this, who would want to be outside? A virgin of all things. This little schemer had really thought of everything. Victoria was riding high, convinced a return to the top was imminent. She conveniently ignored the price she was paying for it. But if Victoria was anything, she was a survivor. When she saw that Lancaster Global's interference was preventing her from securing a controlling stake in Sterling Industries, she finally thought of me again. I was having a quiet drink with Chloe at a downtown bar. As we stepped outside, Victoria blocked our path. She was wearing a simple black slip dress, her face artfully pale and distressed, her eyes red-rimmed. She looked nothing like the polished executive she usually was. "Ethan," she choked out, rushing toward me, oblivious to the stares of passers-by. When I made no move to acknowledge her, she scurried forward and grabbed my arm. "Ethan, I need to talk to you." I raised an eyebrow, my voice dripping with scorn. "Ms. Sterling, I believe we have nothing to say to each other." Suddenly, with a soft thud, she dropped to her knees on the pavement, putting on a masterful performance of a broken woman. "Ethan, I know I was wrong." A beautiful woman kneeling on a public sidewalk was enough to ignite the gossip-hungry soul of any bystander. Dozens of eyes turned our way. "It was all Caleb's fault," she sobbed. "He manipulated me. I was just trying to test you, to see if you cared. Please, give me one more chance. I swear I won't let you down. And I won't get in Chloe's way, I promise. As long as I know you still have a place for me in your heart." To add to the drama, she slapped herself hard across the face twice. I just watched her, my expression a cold, placid mask. The world of high finance is merciless. Did she really think these cheap, soap opera theatrics would work? This wasn't about love. It was about leverage. Besides, the Sterling family hadn't officially disowned her. Her discipline was their responsibility, not mine. And this sudden, dramatic repentance? No one was buying it. But I was curious to see her endgame. Letting the Sterlings handle this entirely on their own felt incomplete. After a long, calculated silence, I feigned a look of weary resignation, my tone softening just a fraction. "Victoria, we're done. My fiancée is Chloe now. You need to stop harassing me." Beside me, Chloe's expression had soured, but after a gentle squeeze of her hand, she understood my play. "I'm his fiancée now," Chloe said, her voice sharp. "Did you get father's permission before pulling a stunt like this?" Victoria had always looked down on her illegitimate half-sister. For 20 years, they played the part of loving siblings in public, while privately clawing at each other for their piece of the family fortune. With another brother in the mix, their inheritance was already stretched thin, and their rivalry had become an open secret. But now wasn't the time for that fight. Victoria was, above all, a pragmatist. "Chloe, darling, don't worry. I'm not trying to take him from you. I just want Ethan to forgive me." She crawled forward on her knees and clutched Chloe's leg. "Chloe, please talk to him for me. Just get me back into the company. I'll do anything." Chloe's eyes glittered, a plan clearly forming behind them. None of it concerned me. As an avid spectator of drama, I was more than happy to watch Victoria's downfall. As expected, Chloe knelt slightly, whispering in Victoria's ear, "It's not impossible to give you a chance. After all, you've already handed Ethan over to me. But there are conditions." Hearing this, a flicker of triumphant cunning flashed in Victoria's eyes. She nodded frantically. Yes, I'll agree to anything." She glanced at me nervously. I gave a nonchalant shrug. "Whatever. This is your family's business. I'm staying out of it. Just do me a favor and stay away from me from now on. I don't care what was or wasn't going on with you and Caleb." My words were harsh, but Victoria didn't care. To her, this was progress. She nodded eagerly. "I understand. I promise, you'll see how sincere I am." And there was never anything between me and Caleb. He never even touched me. Now that Caleb had served his purpose, he was completely disposable. Watching her desperate pledge of loyalty, a false smile touched my lips. "Is that so? You have 1 week. Don't disappoint me." Leaving the bar, Victoria immediately contacted Caleb Vance. The moment he saw her, a knot of dread formed in his stomach. She was smiling at him, a radiant, beautiful smile he had never seen before. It was terrifying. "Victoria, what did you want to see me about?" he asked, sitting down cautiously. He didn't trust anyone anymore. She leaned in close, her voice a seductive whisper. "There's been a small hiccup with Julian's plan. His usual people are tied up. I need you to take care of those old fossils on the board." Caleb's head snapped up, his face a mask of horror. He was a scoundrel, but he wasn't a killer. "What? No, that's impossible. I've never done anything like that." Victoria planted a soft kiss on his cheek. "Don't worry, I'll handle the cleanup. Once they're gone, I'll have full control of the Sterling family. You'll be rewarded handsomely. It was a tempting picture, but for a man as cowardly and greedy as Caleb, it was also a transparent trap. He lowered his head, thinking for a moment before speaking slowly. Victoria, maybe we should wait. It would be safer if Mr. Lancaster's people handled it. Seeing his hesitation, Victoria's face instantly turned to ice. Caleb, this has to be done now, and you're the best person for the job. I told you. I will take care of everything afterward. Once this is done, I'll marry you. Isn't that what you want? To her surprise, Caleb let out a bitter laugh and shoved her arm away. Do you think I'm an idiot? The moment the job is done, you'll be the first one to hand me over to the police, he spat. Victoria, you're trying to use me to do your dirty work and get rid of me at the same time. His accusation hit the mark. Victoria's expression turned venomous. What are you talking about? I'm doing this for our future. But Caleb was no longer under her spell. Our future? No, this is for your future. You want to crawl back to Ethan Lancaster, so you need to get rid of the inconvenient loose end, me. Forget it. With a furious grunt, Caleb stormed out, slamming the door behind him. Victoria stared at his retreating back, the malice in her eyes practically overflowing. Her expression was frigid. If Caleb Vance wouldn't perform one last service for her, then he was nothing but a liability. And she had no problem being ruthless. After leaving Victoria, Caleb Vance knew he had to get out of town. He'd managed to skim a considerable amount of money during his time with her, and if he didn't run now, he'd end up dead. He pushed his car hard, speeding toward the city limits. As he navigated a winding mountain road, a pair of blindingly bright headlights flared in his rearview mirror. Before he could react, a heavy-duty dump truck, seemingly out of control, slammed into him like a rampaging beast. The sound of the collision tore through the quiet night. By the time the flames died down, Caleb's car was a twisted heap of scrap metal. Unfortunately for him, he was still inside. In his villa, Julian Lancaster read the message on his phone, a cold smile touching his lips. He was swirling a glass of red wine when Victoria, clad in a sheer silk nightgown, entered the bedroom. Don't worry, he said, his voice light and dismissive. They left no trace. Good, Victoria purred, draping herself over him. It's just a shame he's gone before he could take care of those old relics on the board. Julian, who had no resistance to her charms, pulled her into a fierce kiss. When they finally broke apart, he ran a hand along her jaw, his eyes dark with desire. Relax. He was useless anyway. I'll handle the rest. While they were otherwise engaged, I was lounging in my older brother's office. Daniel's face was grim, but I just smiled nonchalantly. Ethan, you can't keep acting like this is a game, he said, his voice tight with frustration. Our intel is solid. Victoria and Julian have been conspiring for months. You know what their goal is. And I heard she came to you a few days ago, begging for forgiveness. He looked at me like I was a lost cause. I got up and poured 2 glasses of wine. Daniel, isn't this perfect? We can take them all down at once, I said, handing him a glass. And don't worry about Victoria. Chloe is preparing a very special gift for her. I didn't follow the inner workings of the Sterling family too closely, but I had my sources. Daniel had been weaving this net for a long time. I was just one of the pieces on the board. Lancaster Global had loaded our previous contracts with the Sterlings with so many hidden clauses and traps. All we needed was a trigger. Seeing my relaxed demeanor, Daniel just shook his head in resignation. Fine. You've been lazy since we were kids. Everything is in place. I'm just waiting for your signal. We clinked our glasses together, a shared, knowing smile passing between us. When Victoria finally slipped out of Julian Lancaster's villa, she had meticulously erased every trace of her visit. She changed into a simple, elegant white dress and put on a carefully constructed expression of gentle remorse before parking her car in front of my house. It was only 7 in the morning. When my butler saw her, he moved to inform me, but Victoria stopped him. Please, don't wake Mr. Lancaster. I know he's a late riser. To demonstrate her supposed sincerity, she knelt on the cold stone of the driveway. A beautiful woman, kneeling pitifully in the faint, chilly morning light, was a sight designed to evoke sympathy from anyone who saw it. It wasn't until the sun was high in the sky that I came downstairs with Chloe, both of us looking artfully disheveled. Sir, the butler said discreetly, Ms. Sterling has been kneeling outside for 2 hours. What are your instructions? My tone was flat. Where's my breakfast, Alfred? By the time I finished eating half an hour later, she was still out there. If she wanted to kneel, let her kneel. Other people might feel sorry for her, but I felt no such obligation. Pitying a traitor only makes you complicit in your own betrayal. Let her in, I finally said. When the butler gave her the news, Victoria's body was so stiff from kneeling that she struggled to get up. When she finally stumbled in and met my half-amused gaze, She grit her teeth and actually began to crawl across the foyer toward me. Her upturned face was a perfect mask of hurt feelings and trying to smooth things over. Ethan, I've come to beg for your forgiveness. Caleb Vance has been dealt with. He will never bother us again. I heard the deliberate emphasis on dealt with and had to suppress a laugh. But it also put me on high alert. Get up, I said coolly. Stop making a scene. People will think the Lancasters and the Sterlings are at war. She scrambled to her feet, so unsteady that Chloe had to step in to keep her from falling. Ethan, you see how I've changed, she pleaded. Can you please talk to my father? Let me back into Sterling Industries. I promise, I'll do whatever you say from now on. I was about to refuse, but a look from Chloe stopped me. The trap was set, and it needed Victoria to walk into it. Am I not? Chloe put on a fake smile and took Victoria's arm. Sister, since you're so sincere, I'll talk to Father about letting you come back. But first, there's an agreement you need to sign. Victoria's eyes lit up. She snatched the document and began to read it obsessively. It was a financing agreement for Sterling Industries. The terms were clear and, on the surface, seemed perfectly standard. She read it 3 times, word for word, confirming there were no hidden clauses that would harm her. The knot of tension in her chest finally loosened. What's the matter? Scared to sign? I asked, taking a slow sip of coffee, a flicker of amusement in my eyes. No, not at all. Victoria quickly grabbed a pen, her hand trembling with excitement as she scrawled her signature. In the world of the super-rich, there's nothing that can't be bought or sold with the right offer. If a deal seems impossible, it just means the price isn't high enough. I watched her sign, a cold smile touching my lips. Victoria had no idea that the real trap was never in a single contract. It was a web woven from dozens of interlocking agreements. This one document was harmless on its own, but when combined with the others, which were already riddled with legal loopholes, it was a time bomb. When the company's capital chain finally snapped, Victoria Sterling would be the one holding the detonator. After signing, Victoria began showing up at my house every day, acting like a meek servant, barely daring to speak above a whisper. Ethan, she said one evening, handing me a cup of tea, I was reinstated as the head of finance at Sterling today. Thank you for your help. Her smile was perfectly crafted, but I could see the calculation gleaming in her eyes. I gave a curt nod. Good. You know what happens if there's a next time. What she didn't know was that I also knew about her nightly visits to Julian Lancaster's villa. She thought her deception was flawless. In reality, her every move was being watched. This little conspiracy of hers was doomed from the start. From the window of his villa, Julian Lancaster watched Victoria's car disappear down the drive, a smug smile on his face. On the table, the financing agreement she had signed seemed to mock the entire Lancaster dynasty. Once that capital was in his hands, he could buy out the remaining shareholders and seize control of the family empire. As for Victoria, when he got tired of her, he'd toss her some pocket change and send her on her way. Just as he was basking in his impending victory, a frantic knock sounded at the door. His assistant burst in, his face pale with panic. Mr. Lancaster, Sterling Industries. Their stock went into a free fall the moment the market opened. It's down 30%. We've lost billions in market cap. If we don't do something. Julian snatched the financial report from his assistant's hand before he could finish. The stock chart was a vertical cliff, a terrifying, precipitous drop. His pupils constricted. It's over. He whispered. It's all over. He knew instantly what this meant. The stock crash would expose his illegal financing scheme. He had done it all under the banner of Lancaster Global, completely bypassing the board of directors. He couldn't even begin to imagine the consequences. The 6-month-long game was finally over. My dear uncle was about to take a trip to hell, and he was taking his little mistress with him. When Uncle Julian, his eyes red with fury, stormed into the Lancaster Global headquarters, my brother Daniel and I were waiting. We just smiled and nodded to the detectives who were already waiting in the wings. Take him away, Daniel said, his voice devoid of any warmth. This is Julian Lancaster. He's suspected of illegal fundraising and securities fraud, with the amount exceeding several $billions. Our legal team has confirmed that all of these transactions were conducted in the company's name without board approval. We are formally pressing charges. The detective stepped forward and took hold of a suddenly leaking several $billions. Our legal team has confirmed that all of these transactions were conducted in the company's name without board approval. We are formally pressing charges. The detective stepped forward and took hold of a suddenly limp Julian, gathering the stacks of evidence my brother had prepared. Julian's shouts and pleas for mercy echoed through the vast, empty office, but no one was listening anymore. Outside, the sun was shining brightly. I stood in the hallway, looking out toward the distant Sterling Industries tower, and slowly exhaled. It was finally coming to an end. The atmosphere in the Sterling Industries boardroom was so thick with dread, it was hard to breathe. Ms. Sterling, what do we do? The CFO stammered, his forehead slick with sweat, the report in his hand crumpled into a ball. The financing agreement you signed has imploded. The capital isn't coming through. If this continues, 5 of our key projects will go under from a broken supply chain. The marketing director's voice cracked. Our partners are calling to terminate their contracts. The banks have issued default notices. All eyes in the room turned to Victoria, who sat frozen at the head of the table. Their gazes were a mixture of panic and accusation. The very agreement that had put her back in the CEO's chair was now the guillotine poised to take her head. The team she had bought with promises and money was already planning their escape. Paralyzed by fear, Victoria's eyes darted around the room until they landed on Chloe, who sat calmly to one side. She pointed a trembling finger. "It was you, wasn't it?" she shrieked. "You gave me that agreement. This was your plan all along, to destroy me." Chloe let out a soft laugh. "Sister, that's not fair. Everyone knows about your relationship with Julian Lancaster. You can't just throw mud now that you're drowning in it." Victoria took a deep, shuddering breath, knowing a fight with Chloe was pointless. She fumbled for her phone and dialed my number. Everyone in that room knew the only entity that could save them now was the Lancaster family. The moment I answered, her voice came out as a desperate sob. "Ethan, you did this, didn't you? Why? Why would you do this to me?" Listening to her hysterics, I just laughed, my voice laced with undisguised contempt. "Ms. Sterling, the stock market is a risky place. Invest at your own peril. Hasn't anyone ever taught you that?" She finally understood why I had forgiven her so easily. But it was too late. There were no do-overs in this game, and she still didn't seem to grasp that the Lancasters were never the masterminds. This was a Sterling family affair. Why else had her father been so silent? "No, Ethan, you promised. You promised you forgave me." I was done listening to her nonsense. I cut her off with a final, cold statement. "I did forgive you, Victoria. You have only yourself to blame. You got greedy. Did you really think your own family didn't know you were plotting against them?" Hearing the dead tone on the other end of the line, Victoria screamed and hurled her phone against the wall, where it shattered. Before she could formulate another thought, the boardroom doors flew open. Her father, Marcus Sterling, strode in, his face a mask of cold fury. Behind him stood several police detectives. "Victoria," he said, his voice dangerously low, "I never thought my own daughter could be such a monster. Wanting the company is one thing, but plotting to have your own family killed. You can go with them." He gestured to the detectives. With a cry, Victoria collapsed, scrambling to Chloe's feet and clutching her leg. "Chloe, I won't fight you for anything, I swear. Just let me go. I know Ethan will listen to you. Please." Chloe looked down at the pathetic woman groveling before her and smiled. Victoria's hair was a mess. Her dress was smudged with dust, and all traces of her former elegance were gone. Chloe's smile was a beautiful, terrible thing, masking 2 decades of repressed rage. She lifted her foot, the stiletto heel of her shoe coming down hard on the back of Victoria's outstretched hand. "Ah!" Victoria screamed, her face going white with pain. "Victoria, who do you think you are?" Chloe's voice was a triumphant sneer. "You tried to murder your own parents. You stopped being a Sterling a long time ago. But I should thank you. If it weren't for you, I'd never have become the future Mrs. Lancaster. Don't worry, when Ethan and I get married, I'll be sure to send you a piece of the cake in prison." She pressed down harder with her heel, watching Victoria's face twist in agony, a flicker of pure satisfaction in her eyes. Tears of pain and humiliation streamed down Victoria's face, but she held on tight. "Sister, please let me go. I'll leave. I'll never come back." Marcus, not wanting to air any more of his family's dirty laundry, kicked at his daughter's side. "Take her away," he ordered the detectives. "Prosecute her to the fullest extent of the law. I did not have a daughter by that name." The detectives moved in and hauled Victoria to her feet. Her hand was already swelling and turning a dark purple, but she was still crying, still begging for a mercy that would never come. Soon after, Chloe and I announced our engagement. With a massive capital injection from Lancaster Global, the crisis at Sterling Industries was easily resolved. And Chloe, true to her word, made a special trip on our engagement day. She went to the county detention center to deliver a piece of candy to her sister. In the stark visiting room, Victoria stared at me with eyes full of hatred. I just smiled. Chloe's expression was one of pure, unadulterated scorn. "Victoria, you really are a fool," she said. "Did you honestly think no one knew about your disgusting little schemes? Father spent a fortune to get the Lancasters to agree to simply exile you. He was going to send you abroad with instructions never to return. But you just had to keep digging your own grave. Victoria's head snapped up, the last bit of color draining from her face. Her lips trembled, but no words came out. All this time, she thought her plans were secret, her actions invisible. The truth was, she'd been exposed from the very beginning. No, it was Julian, she stammered. He forced me to do it. I didn't know anything. I had to laugh. She was still trying to lie her way out. If her father didn't have irrefutable proof, would he really have allowed one daughter to send another to prison? Forced you? I asked, ticking off her crimes. You seemed pretty willing in all those hotel rooms. Did he force you to bring Caleb Vance back from the dead? 2. Did he force you to hire a hitman to run Caleb off the road? When you decided to conspire with an outsider to destroy your own family, you should have known it would end like this. With every word I spoke, Victoria's face grew paler, until she finally slumped to the floor in a boneless heap. I shook my head. This was boring. I stood up, and Chloe and I turned to leave. Just as we reached the door, she scrambled onto her knees. Ethan, please, just let me go, she cried. I'll do anything you want. I swear I'm still clean. She looked desperately between us. No, wait. I'll take care of Chloe when she has the baby. I'll be her servant. Just forgive me. I'll do anything. Chloe looked back at her, then deliberately looped her arm through mine, leaning her head on my shoulder. Sorry, dear sister, she said, her voice sweet as poison. I have everything you had, and a few things you never will. For starters, Ethan isn't interested in anyone else's leftovers. Later, Julian Lancaster was sentenced to life in prison. The evidence for murder for hire and massive financial fraud was so overwhelming that not even the best lawyers could help him. As for Victoria, her fate was much the same. Her name was never mentioned by the Lancasters or the Sterlings again. I knew her father had made arrangements. He could not tolerate the existence of a daughter who was such a stain on his legacy.